Working with tables in InDesign is very similar to working with tables in a word processing program. And when you work with a table, what you're doing is you're working with information that's been organized into vertical columns and horizontal rows. And the important thing to remember is that columns are vertical and rows are horizontal. And I have a table right here that I have brought into InDesign. And the point where a row and a column intersect is called a cell. And you can see a cell right here. And if you have your type tool, you can actually click, and now you're inside an individual cell. That's the cell. And if we come over here, you'll see that that's the next cell over. And if you tab on your computer, you can tab through the individual cells in InDesign going from left to right. Now, in between the cells are a border, and as you hover over them, you can see that your cursor changes, and that allows you to change the width of a cell. And underneath, there's also a cell border, and you can change the height of the cell by going up and down. Now, also across the top of the cell, you have a special cell, basically. And this row is actually a header row. And when you're to the left of this header row, you can see that you can select the entire row by just clicking on it when you have that arrow pointing towards the cells. Now that you know a little bit about tables, we're going to talk about how to create one. And to create a table in InDesign, the first thing that you want to do is make sure you're on your type tool and come down to where you want the table located. And what you're going to do is you're going to drag out a text frame. And once you've dragged out your text frame, you'll see that you have your cursor blinking inside the text frame, and that says that you're ready to insert some text. But instead of going ahead and typing, what we're going to do is we're going to come up to the menu bar and go to Table and go to Insert Table. And when you click on that, you're going to get a dialog box, and that's where you specify how many rows, how many columns, what you want as a header row, what you want as a footer row, and whether you want to apply a style. And let's just go ahead and recreate this table from scratch. And in order to do that, we need to see how many rows and columns we have. And in this particular table, we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 rows, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 columns. So 7 rows and 8 columns. So let's go ahead and type that in. And you may be thinking, well, wait, isn't that a row too? It is, but it's actually a header row, so it doesn't count as part of the counting process. And once we have that set up, that is going to be our table. And so you go ahead and hit OK, and that's going to go and create a table that looks an awful lot like that one there, with a couple of differences. And the main differences are pretty obvious. Basically, you've got a blue header in the top one, and this first row here is actually a little bit taller than the other one. So we're just going to go ahead and do that now. Now, before we address the blue box up at the top, the blue header, we're going to actually talk about how to enter text. And to enter text is really simple. You just click on your cell and then go ahead and start typing. And when your text is entered, just go ahead and hit Tab, and then you can start typing the text on the next cell. So that's starting to look more like the text box up there. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to work on our header row. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to click in there, and nothing's happening. And we're going to try it again, and once again, nothing's happening. And why nothing's happening is because actually I made a mistake when I entered the text in here. If we grab that and we pull it down, you will see that that is actually not a row. That is the space between this table frame and this table frame. There's actually not a row that's part of the table in there. So we need to go back into our text, and we need to get rid of this row because we put in our text here and it actually should be a header row. So let's go up to Table, And then let's go to delete, and then you're going to go row, and you're just going to delete that row. Now we need to insert a row back in. So we're going to go back up to table, and we're going to go into insert, and we're going to go to row, and we're going to insert, it's going to ask us for a number, and we'll just do 1, and we want it above where we currently are. Wherever you were with your cursor, that's where it's going to insert it, in either above or below, depending on where you want it and however many number you specify. So go ahead and hit OK. And we've now inserted a header row across the top, and we can start working with the formatting to make it look more like that. So let's go ahead, and the first thing that we want to do is we want to select this entire row. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to click on that, and that selected all the cells in that row. And then we're going to come up to table again, and we're going to select merge cells. And when you merge cells, what you're doing is you're telling the program to take all the cells that are in that row and turn them into one large cell. So we're going to go ahead and hit merge cells, and we'll click off that, and you now see that you have one large cell across the top. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to make our cell bigger. And there's a couple of ways that you can do this. And the first way would be to go up to Window on your menu bar, click on that, come down to Type and Tables, and then go over to Select Table. And that's going to bring up your table panel. And in the table panel, this is where you specify the number of rows, the number of columns. Your row height is going to be right there, and that's where you adjust it. And this is your column width. And then you have some other options for alignment, rotating, some other stuff. Well, that's one thing that you can use to adjust your row height, but we're not going to use that. So let's go ahead and close that out. And what we're going to do is we're actually going to eyeball this by coming here to hover over right over that lower border on the top row, and then click and drag, and just do that until you think you've got that row height just about right. And the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to click into that header row, and we're going to go up to Table on our menu bar, click on that, and then come down to Cell Options, and we're going to do Strokes and Fills. And when you go to Strokes and Fills, this is where you get to set a lot of your options for your cell and how it looks. And right now we want to kind of duplicate something that looks like that. And as you can see, the weight of our cell border is going to be less than the weight of this cell border up here. So we're going to want to go up on this until it gets a little bit bigger. And you can actually preview it so that you have a better eyeball look at it. And that's a little too thick. So let's go back down to 3. And then you can see that the cell color here is kind of a blue color. So if you go to Cell Fill and come down to blue, you now have a border that looks an awful lot like the one on top. So let's go ahead and hit OK. And that's how you make that border filled in like that. So now that I have a table that's pretty close to looking like the table up here, with the exception being the text in it, I'm going to turn my attention back to this table, and I want to turn my attention to the text in this table up here, because I'm a little bit annoyed by the fact that the text in these cells is at the top of the cell, leaving this big amount of white space right underneath it, and I want to do something about that. So in order to do that, I'm going to select these cells, and then I'm going to come up to Table, and I'm going to go to Cell Options, and I'm going to go to Text, and I'm going to mess with my cell insets. And the cell insets is kind of like padding on your cell, and when you have this clicked, that's going to link your top and bottom numbers together, which is sometimes helpful and sometimes not. And as you go up and down and you've got your preview on, you'll see the effect of changing your cell insets. That's bringing it down, but it's also making the border on the bottom a little bit further away, so you're keeping that gap there. So I want to undo that, and I'm going to make the bottom smaller until it looks even and it looks like the text is right in the middle. And now we have text that's centered in that cell. which I think looks a lot better. Now, also in this dialog box, you will find options for changing your vertical justification. If you have text that's vertical, you can align it here and change its vertical justification. You can change your paragraph spacing limit, which is just the spacing between paragraphs and or different lines. You can change your first baseline. You can also set it to clip the contents of a cell. And if you clip the contents of a cell, say you bring in a graphic and it's bigger than your cell, if you don't do that, it's going to stretch the cell to fit the graphic, and you don't always want to do that, so your option to change that is here. And additionally, you can change your text rotation. So if I wanted to change my text to 180, I could do it there, and now it's upside down, or I could go 90 and make it vertical. Of course, you can't see that because it's actually bigger than the cell, so it's not showing it. But that's some options that you have with your text and where to find your cell options. So I'm going to go ahead and hit OK. And a couple of quick things before we leave this lesson. If you come up to Table and go down to your Table Options and Table Setup, this is where you can set up options for your table. You can set up your table dimensions, you can set up your table border, like if you want the border around the entire table and not particularly in the cells. You can go ahead and set that up here by selecting a weight for it, and as you can see, it just kind of outlined it, which is sometimes nice. And you can also do things like set up your table spacing before and after. If you have this right before text, you might want to change the spacing so that you have a bigger or smaller gap before or after. You can also set up your stroke drawing order here, and that's where your options for that are. Another thing, if you wanted to set up some alternating fill rows, you're going to come back up to Table, go to Table Options, and here you have alternating row strokes, alternating column strokes, and here's alternating fills. Click on that, and then you have to set up an alternating pattern. Click on that, and you can decide what pattern you want. Let's go with every second row. And once you have that set up, you can see in the preview that that's what it's going to do. And if you like it, go ahead and hit OK. Don't like it, Control Z right out of it, or go to Edit, Undo Table Options. And finally, if you don't even want to mess with making a table in InDesign, you just want to bring one in, you do it the same way that you bring in text. You just go up to File and Place, and that'll bring your dialog box. You select your table, and it will bring that in for you.